Oh, yeah. No, everything's fine. Just it works. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
My name is Flemming, and I was so lucky that this was in probably November 1983, got a phone call from a guy I didn't know, Danish guy. He spoke Danish to me. And he said these words, I have a rock band, we like play heavy rock, we'd like to record in your studio. Because we found out that the dollar is so strong that for the not very much money we get from the record label, we could actually get twice as much time in the studio in Europe as we can get in the States. And I was like, yeah, sure, just come on and everything. And looking back at it now, more than 40 years later, I saw we had a text from their record label. They were on a small independent record label called Megaforce. We actually get a text like 2 or 3 days before they come that says, we probably only need a week, which was like, we ended up spending 3 weeks from February 20th, 1984. In sweet silence, and then they were supposed to go on tour because the plan was we'll tour, make money to pay for the studio because they knew it was going to be more expensive than the amount of money they got from the record label. So they were going to make money on tour, then they were going to go in the studio, then they were going to go on another tour and play a festival, and then they would come back. So after the first 3 weeks, they had like a month and a half off. Because they were going on tour, and then they had to come back to the studio to finish the album. What happened was that tour got cancelled, and the festival they were playing got cancelled too. So basically, they went to London and got totally pissed with anthrax. There's some really good stories over there. Cliff got arrested with this. Yeah, exactly. They didn't find his pot. Problem was that just before they came into the studio, somebody had stolen all their equipment. So Lars had gotten a new drum kit, but James was missing his guitar amp. And it was a modified Marshall amp, and of course nobody had written down what the modifications were. So the first thing we did was we actually tried, I called everybody I knew that played like hard rock, it was called in those days. We didn't have heavy metal back in those days. And I called Merciful Fate, I called Artillery, I called Maltese Falcon, all of these bands, and said, you have a Marshall stack? Please bring it in the studio. So when they showed up on the 20th of February in 1984, I had 12 Marshall stacks in the studio James could try out. And while we did that, we had Lars setting up his drums in a huge back room, which was like twice the size of this, and it was basically just a warehouse where we stored all the boxes for the band. And that's why the drum sound is the way it is, because that room really was loud. And we tried to recreate that on the master class. And we got the guitar sound going. It was, I don't know which amp we used, but James found one he liked. Hank Sherman from Merciful Fate claims it's his 100-watt Marshall amp that was used. I don't know whether that's true or not. It probably is. We got Lars's drum sound going. Took a while. And because it was February and it was cold in Denmark, it was snowing and everything. And the room was in the back, was that big hall, and that was not heated. I had to buy some gas heaters to heat up the room, otherwise Lars would get totally frozen. But we were working in the night shift. We had 2 shifts in the studio. We had somebody who started at 10 o'clock in the morning till 8. Then we had a 1-hour changeover. And at 7 we would start. So I would get in at about 6, turn on the heaters. But that meant that the drum kit, these skins, they would be cold and warm, so they would go out of tune. Mm-hmm. So I said to Lars, well, you need to tune the drums every day. And he was like, I don't know how to do that. But luckily, one of the guys that had brought the Marshall stack is heavy, so he'd asked his drummer to help him carry it. And that drummer was Flemming Rasmussen, the drum tech that ended up being the drum tech for Lars in like 35 years. And he said, I can tune the drums. And Lars hired him right on the spot, and he stayed with Metallica for 35 years. He is unfortunately now dead. He died 2 years ago. I was at his funeral. Metallica had paid for it. They had to let him go in the end. There was a problem with too much alcohol, unfortunately, at the end. That was really sad, but yeah. Cliff set up everything. The way we worked, where we played everybody together. And because Lars was in the back room and Cliff's equipment was somewhere else, I had to make a shitload of really long wires so they could be standing next to Lars. And one of them is this blue wire. And I remember when we did the master class, and I said to Tool, go and get, we call him Tool, by the way. Said, go and get that cable, and he was walking with it, and I said, oh, by the way, Cliff used that cable. He was like, oh, what? so yeah, he was yeah. It was actually twice as long. That's how far away Cliff's bass equipment was from the drums. So we actually cut it in half. I have two now. But when it was twice the size, that was the cable. So actually Cliff's bass has been going through that cable, which is kind of strange to think about. As I said, the way we recorded this was everybody played at once. And once we'd done the drums and they were fixed, we did the rhythm guitars. And then when it came time to do the bass, we hooked everything up, and Cliff got a couple of headphones on, and I have a picture somewhere of him with headphones on in the studio. He didn't like that. And it was pretty difficult for Cliff to play to headphones. So fortunately, I had some really big JBL speakers, a bit like these. So I fired them up and said to Cliff, we'll just move your gear so it's in a small room somewhere, and we'll mic it up, and you can just run around with that long cable and play to the speakers, just like when you're playing live. And we started the tape, and we could hear Cliff playing, but we couldn't see him, so we're like, what the fuck is going on? So we looked out the window of the studio, and suddenly we could see his hair coming up and down. And he was like jumping around out there doing his thing, and I mean, it's true what they say, Cliff was an extraordinary bass player. He did those basses, I mean, really fast, because now he was comfortable without wearing headphones. And also in this whole doing the chords and can we do this and that, Cliff was the only one who had a musical education. So he was helping the other guys do some chord progressions and stuff like that. And in those days with heavy metal, actually one of the things you didn't do in that small circle that was there, that was use acoustic guitars. So of course we started the album with acoustic guitars, which is basically also a credit to Metallica. Somebody says you can't do it, they will do that right away. It was a big fuck you to everybody else. And I remember reading people going, okay, so we heard about this metal band, and then they put the album on, and there was this beautiful acoustic guitar, and so they thought, what the hell? And then suddenly it kicks in. But that was the way Metallica did it. We always just did what we felt. There's never been any kind of, we do this for the record label, except for one thing. The only time Metallica ever did something that was not for themselves. That was when we did Ride the Lightning, because, as I said, they were on that small record label, and they wanted a major label deal. So on Ride the Lightning, they'd done one song. So if they were approached by a major label and they said, "Where's the single?" they could go, "It's right here." And it's the song called Escape. And Ride the Lightning is more than 40 years old. Metallica has played that song live one time. One fucking time. And that was their own festival where they played Ride the Lightning in its entirety, so they had to play it. Because James Hetfield seriously hates that song. Which is kind of sad, because it's actually a pretty good song, except for the chorus, which is so bad. I mean, it's so 80s rock, that chorus. So if they took that out and put in another chorus, it would actually be a great song. And there's another thing interesting about that, is that in the middle part, we wanted it to sound a bit heavier. So Lars had found an anvil in Armbåt for the Swedish, and wanted to hit that with a hammer. But an anvil weighs about 150 kilos, and the studio is on the first floor. So we had to carry that shit up. And well, it's on the album. I'm pretty sure I recorded that because Lars tried and couldn't hit the beat. But I have this plan. Next time they come to Copenhagen, I will meet up at the backstage with an anvil and say, "I'll play along on Escape." See if I can get James to play it. Probably won't. But yeah, Cliff played his basses, was a big influence on the songs that they finished. They actually finished 4 songs in the studio. Because when they came back after they'd been to London to finish off the album, in the first period they'd stayed with friends. When they came back, funnily enough, none of their friends wanted them sleeping over, so you can guess how that went. So they actually stayed at the studio. They actually slept in the studio. We had a first floor that we hadn't built into our B studio yet. And we had the weekends off, so they spent the weekends in the studio writing the last couple of songs they needed to do, while we finished off the songs we already recorded. And actually, once we're done recording everything, we listened to the whole thing through. And I decided that the version that they'd done of For Whom the Bell Tolls just wasn't good enough, so we actually redid that. So there is another version of For Whom the Bell Tolls recorded for Ride the Lightning. But the version we did ended up played to a click. So that's the first time ever they played to a click track. The rest of Ride the Lightning is played live. And that's another thing that's interesting about those albums, is that they're all recorded on analog 24-track tape. So that means there's no moving any hits, there's no auto-tune, there's no taking the back vocals from the chorus and putting them in the next chorus. It's all fucking played. So what you hear on those albums is played by the guys. There's no artificial anything, because we just didn't have that in those days. And the album was then released on Megaforce, even though during the Ride the Lightning session they were talking to a British label called Bronze. And actually the owner of that label, Jerry Bronze, came with his son at one point just before we were starting the second half of the sessions. And they were so close to writing a deal that it actually says Bronze as clients on some of the track sheets. And he came and listened to what we'd done, and we were all like, fucking best thing I've ever did, was my opinion. I loved it. People in the studio went, "You were right, Flemming. Yeah, I'm fine. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm fine. Why? They can't play. I was like, what are you talking about? It's the best thing I've ever done. They just didn't get the energy and the drive and all that, because it was really new back then. I mean, it's hard to understand now when you have that metal scene that is here, but back then, nobody played like Metallica. That they were the only ones doing that. There were some other bands that went in the same direction, but none of them were as heavy as Metallica was then. And after hearing it, the guy from Bronze Records said, it's all right, but it doesn't have that vibe. And I was like, because I was sitting reading the paper because it was their meeting, so they were having the meeting. And his idea was that they canceled everything they'd done and they should start all over and his son should produce the album. And I remember looking at James and Cliff and they just went, fuck off. And 2 weeks later in Lars's diary it says, bye Bronze. So we finished the album, I mixed it and sent it to the States to Megaforce. And they released it on the 27th of July, 1984. And I know that for a fact because that's the day we got married. And it also happens to be my wife's birthday. So, really, seriously. And I didn't realize till Ride the Lightning had like 10-year anniversary. I was like, what? Because it was on Megaforce, and I didn't, they didn't send me the album until months later. So yeah, every time there's a big celebration for Ride the Lightning, I'm like, no, sorry, I can't. I've got a wedding anniversary. But yeah, apparently some good thing happened that day, right? We're still married. So we've been married for 41 years, as you probably understand now. Then everything went really well. They went on tour, and like in '85, almost summer, Lars calls and says, "We're going to do a new album. We're going to record it in Los Angeles." So I went, "We need a studio then." Yeah. So I got flown into Los Angeles, and me and Lars went studio shopping for about 2 weeks, 10 days, something like that, to find a studio. And studios in America was very different. They didn't look like other Sweet Silence. So after I went home and we hadn't found a proper studio, a couple of days later, Lars called and said, we had a band meeting, we're coming to Copenhagen. Mm-hmm. And they booked from September 3rd till the morning of Christmas evening to record Master of Puppets. The plan was we should also mix it. And this time they were on Elektra. 3 months after Ride the Lightning was released, they got a record deal with Elektra. They were so smart, they only made the record deal for 25 years. So in October 2009, all rights to all music recorded on Elektra and Megaforce came back to Metallica. So they now own all the rights. That's why they do all the boxes, because now they can re-release everything with all the shit that Lars hid in his covers with demo tapes and I don't know what the fuck. Yeah, that guy must have the biggest warehouse with Metallica shit. Nobody in the. I mean, it's incredible. But because they were on a major label, they this time had hotels. Way. And. I'd seen how they ate when we did Ride the Lightning. So I called up their management and said, okay, now that they have to be here for 4 months, and I saw these guys eat on the last album, I have an idea for you. And I said, you send me a shitload of money, and I'll have my wife cook for them every day. And the management said, that's a fucking brilliant idea. So, from September 3rd until Christmas, the morning of Christmas evening, every day, Metallica met up at our house at 6 o'clock to eat dinner. And Pernilla's going to tell you about that.
And I'm not so good to speak English as Flemming, so I try, because it's first time I do it in English, so I have a little faith. As Flemming told you, I got the job as cooking food for the 4 guys. And I have seen them before, so I know what it was. But the first day they got, and I have made special places for them at the family dinner, because we were whole family eating every day in the house. So they got their own seat. And the first time they have to eat in our place, they have to have meatball. We call it frikadeller in Denmark. And a very legendary and unknown remoulade sauce. It's a very special sauce we made in Denmark, or I do. Yeah, and they like it so much, so it's credit on the cover of Master of Puppets. Tak for remoulade. We all sat down, and the guys took their fork, their plate, put on a lot of food on the plates, and then they took their fork and turned it around in the plate, and I look. And then they do like this, around the plate and into the fork, and the only thing we could hear the next day there was this one at that plate. And I said, from now on, you take your head up, and then you eat with a fork and a knife. So they do it, except for one guy. Cliff. No? Lars. So the third day, I put a blender on his plate and said, then you can eat like that. After the meal, they go into our big living room and digest their food. And then Flemming took our dog, Ljungby brothers, Ljungby, and they all went down to the studio, what, about 200 meters from where we live.
It took about 5 minutes.
Yeah. They were, and they are, great guys. And we have many wonderful hours with them. It became December, and Cliff said to me, if I would go into Copenhagen with him, because he wants to buy a bear for his sister Connie. And we were together a whole day, and he was a very nice guy, and I think a lot of him. And the day in Copenhagen. Thank you.
Yeah. So actually, if you had a time machine, you could go back to my house in 86, 85, it was in 85. And every day, me and the 4 guys from Metallica and my dog would walk from my place. It took about 5 minutes to the studio, and nobody gave a shit, because nobody knew who the fuck Metallica was. It was incredible. It was the same kind of schedule. We worked at night, it was the same room we used. We had the heaters going on. Jake had to tune everything. By the way, Lars' drum tech, Jake, his name was Flemming too. So my name is Flemming as well. And I mean, we couldn't have two Flemings on the set. So when he got hired, when we did Ride the Lightning, said, so what the fuck are we gonna do about that? And James was really quick and said, from now on, you're Jake. And he was called Jake for the rest of his life. That was basically it. And he was with Metallica for 35 years, so yeah. But it was the same deal. We did all the recordings. Now they didn't have Marshall amps, they had the Boogie amps, which was a pain in the ass. I had to use some really expensive equipment to get it to sound right, and if you look over there behind, we put my notes here, so you can see some of the settings for these sounds. And today I would just take a picture of the amp, but back in those days you had to write everything down, and I did. And the reason why I did that was if we had to fix some stuff, we could go back and recreate the guitar sounds, which helped us very, very much when we did the masterclass. And first of all, thanks to the museum for letting us live the drums. I am so glad I was going to get my tickets for the shows in Copenhagen. They played 14th and 16th of June, like 2 years ago. Standing in line waiting, and that little Mexican guy came, "Are you Flemming Rasmussen?" "Yeah, who the fuck are you?" A lot of people ask me that question. I'm going to say no from now on. What are the chances? I mean, one in a million, right? And it turned out, because it said you can pick up your tickets from 2 o'clock. I was there at like 2:15. Turned out the tickets weren't there till 4 o'clock, so if I hadn't met Alfredo, I would have wasted my time, but it turned out to be one of the best mistakes ever made, so that was really, really good. But on the Master of Puppets sessions, we started 6 o'clock, my house, dinner. By the way, Lars didn't like the blender joke. He actually said, "That's not funny." And then everybody else in the band went, "Yeah, it is." We chilled for a bit, and then we walked to the studio, started recorded all night. Normally a session is like 8 hours, so that's from 7 in the evening till 3 in the morning. But when you're there at night, nobody comes in till the next morning. So even though we maybe were done at 3, and sometimes we were done at 4, sometimes we were done at 5, but even if we finished early, they never went back to the hotel. I was like, what the hell is going on? And especially Cliff loved to play poker. Cliff was a huge poker fan, but I mean, I think the maximum I won for him is 1 krona, because we played for like nothing. And we'd taken 3, 4, 5, and 6 out of the deck, and 2 was a joker. There were 2 other jokers. And then whenever it was Cliff's turn to deal, the dealer always decided if there were extra jokers. It was always one-eyed jacks and kings with no idea. So when Cliff was dealing, you could actually have 8 aces, which was kind of strange, since, but he loved it. And I didn't really understand why. I mean, why are we sitting here drinking beer and instead of going home to sleep? And they always left at like 5:30, 5:45, something like that. And then a month into the session, I realized that's because the breakfast buffet at Hotel Scandinavia, where they lived, opens at 6 in the morning. So they went straight from the studio to the breakfast buffet. Once they'd eaten breakfast, they would go to bed. They would sleep all day, get up, go to my house, eat dinner, and then go to the studio. So it's like that all the time. It was fantastic. And as I said, Cliff was a huge part of those sessions being so great. I also showed Cliff Christiania in Copenhagen, because when they got arrested in London, people know Cliff liked to smoke weed, which was fine. I mean, you'd understand that when you saw him with the fucking bell-button pants and everything. That was in the 80s. Everybody had pants like this because New Wave was in. That was the good thing about the 80s. I didn't do any of that shit. I did 3 Metallica albums, so that was fine. And we finished the recordings at the morning of Christmas Eve. And we sent Cliff, James, and Kurt home on a plane, because when you fly from Copenhagen to San Francisco, you fly in the morning, you land in the afternoon. And then Lars stayed, and we finished some drum overdubs between Christmas and New Year. They had to play San Francisco on New Year, so we packed all the tapes and everything. I was supposed to mix that album as well, but we barely finished recording it, so it ended up being Michael Wagner mixing it, he did a very good job. Met him when it had 30-year jubilee. I met him in Antwerpen. Yeah, I had done a Belgian punk band, and they had a release on the November 3rd in Antwerpen, and had invited me to the release. And I thought, what's happening in Antwerpen? Something we can do? And I checked the schedule. Metallica played the 2nd and the 4th, so guess what we did? And actually, I went there and I did like a video thing with the band in their more tune-up room, and with me and Michael Wagner. It was really, really nice. Talking about the 30-year jubilee. 40-year jubilee is next year. I don't even know when it's released, but we'll find out. But Lars went home, and as Lars leaves the hotel to get into a taxi, the hotel manager comes out with a piece of paper. Turns out they didn't have breakfast in their hotel rooms, so it was four rooms, 4 months of breakfast, 30,000 Danish kroners. And Lars just got into the car and said, "Airport now." But as I normally say, I'm guessing they have paid it now. We did. So, you need to speak to this guy in a bit, yeah?
Yeah, we've got 20 minutes.
That's fine. So, let's get something to drink, and thanks a lot for coming.